A computer for school or work and play. It can be a tough balance to strike, especially when you need it to be portable. The Dell XPS 9550 isn't cheap. That much we can see from a quick look at their website. But is it great? And does it strike that balance? Here are my thoughts. On the outside, this is a nice computer. It isn't likely to win any awards, particularly for creativity, but I really like it. The top has a Dell logo in the middle and a brushed aluminum kind of texture, which is really nice. It's not prone to fingerprints at all, but you'll want to keep it clean as dirt really stands out on it. You can also draw on it with a pencil if you really want to. The bottom has the same material with strips of rubbery material to keep the computer from sliding around on your desk, vents for airflow, not so great speakers, and in the middle, an XPS logo flap with the serial number and other stuff beneath it. The flap is kind of hard to open and basically a danger to do it with your fingernail, but I've never needed to open it, and it does look pretty nice, so who cares. And back to the speakers, they're not terrible, but they're certainly not great. And while they sound okay in ideal situations, they can be easily covered if the laptop is sitting in your lap. So ideal situations aren't necessarily that often. This isn't too much of a problem for me, but it's definitely an annoyance. On the right side, we have an SD card slot that's fairly deep, so it doesn't worry me too much about leaving a card in for a while, like some where I might be concerned about accidentally breaking it off or something. In fact, it actually only sticks out about as much as the wireless receiver for my Logitech mouse, which I do leave in all the time. So you could probably even just use it to add some storage to the computer if you really wanted to. Oh, and a quick thanks to Dell. The SD card slot is really useful for me. Every time I make a video like this, I use SD cards, so I'm glad they still include it. Good on you. Moving on, we have a USB 3.1 Gen 1 port, which is 5 megabits per second, which has power share for charging something through the port even when the computer is off, a battery light indicator with a button to activate it, which is a nice idea, but the LEDs are inlaid and dim, so you have to be pretty much looking at it head on to actually see them, and a Kensington lock slot. On the left, we have a 3.5mm headphone microphone combo jack, a Thunderbolt 3 40 gigabits per second port, which doubles as USB 3.1 Gen 2, 10 gigabits per second port over a USB Type-C reversible connector, which also has power share and power in for charging the laptop, as well as being able to be adapted into a variety of display and other connectors. We also have an HDMI 1.4 port, another USB 3.1 Gen 1 port, which is identical in specs to the one on the right side, and the main power in charging port. While it's a little bit of a bummer that we've only got 2 standard USB Type-A ports, the addition of separate SD card slots and an HDMI port and a USB-C/Thunderbolt port that can be used for many different adapters and hubs definitely makes up for it in my mind, and there really isn't a lack of connectivity here. Especially if you go for a cheap USB-C to A adapter that will give you a third standard USB port if you're not using the C or Thunderbolt port for anything else. And if you're using a good adapter, it will provide USB 3.1 Gen 2 speeds, double that of the other USB ports. I'll also note that there's a light on the front of the laptop which is white when the battery is above 10% and orange when it's below 10%, which has been pretty useful. But that's enough of the outside, let's take a look at the inside. And speaking of which, I really wish this computer had a groove or something to help you get your finger under the lid to open it. It's a little thing, but it's actually pretty annoying that it doesn't have one, especially when the hinge is so stiff. And I'm not complaining about that in general. The configuration of the laptop I have is the one with the 3840 by 2160 UHD touchscreen display. So as much as I like a hinge that'll go open with one finger, the solid hinge makes the touchscreen much better. So that actually makes sense to me. Still though, a groove would be nice. Come on, Dell. Also, the bezels, or lack thereof, are awesome. Dell claims that this is the smallest footprint 15-inch laptop in the world, and I believe them. I came to this computer from a 13-inch MacBook Air, and as far as footprint goes, there was a shockingly small difference. This is great for me, because even though thickness and weight are certainly factors, having a laptop with a small footprint is for me what makes the biggest difference in how bulky it feels. The webcam is positioned below the screen as there's no room for it above, and it's to the left to give space to the Dell logo. In addition to looking like you're looking above the camera and to the right of it when you're looking in the middle of the screen, like I'm doing right now, the actual quality of the camera and the microphone aren't very good. Certainly they're usable in a pinch, but neither is really ideal. The keyboard is nice. I'd personally like a little bit more key travel, but it isn't bad at all, and certainly there's nothing about it that slows my typing down. The layout is good, although the squashed arrow keys are unfortunate, and the backlight is always appreciated. I also wish we could somehow get a number pad crammed in, but I don't think that's realistic at all, so it's not like I'm taking points off. Not that I actually do this by points. The trackpad is actually excellent. You may have heard people always say that Macs have the best trackpads. Well, that's true, at least in my opinion. Mac trackpads are amazing. But this one is not far behind. Well, at first I didn't like the feel of the material, being used to the MacBook's metal trackpad. Nowadays this one not only feels great, but is quite accurate as well, and I really have no complaints at all. Now let's talk specs. There are many different configurations for this laptop, so many, in fact, that you might think it would make more sense to use a configuration tool when you're buying one online that lets you select your processor, SSD, RAM, screen, battery size, and GPU preferences on your own. Dell, however, apparently doesn't agree, and instead you have to choose one of their available configurations. A configuration tool would be especially useful given that it's possible to get the laptop with an M.2 SSD and a 2.5-inch hard drive, and which configurations feature this may be hard to weed out or match with the other specs you want. Not to mention that if you do want a 2.5-inch hard drive, only the versions that come with that actually have an adapter that you need on the inside of the computer. So if you get one that doesn't have it, you'll have to buy the adapter separately. And the version of the laptop with the bigger 84 watt-hour battery that I have doesn't have space for that hard drive. So if you're looking at using the SSD and the hard drive, things are a little bit complicated and you'll want to be sure of the configuration you buy. At the time of writing this review, there are 9 different spec configurations on Dell's Canadian site and 7 on their US site, so at least there are options. The configuration I'm running is with the aforementioned UHD touch display, a quad-core non-hyper-threaded i5-6300HQ processor at 2.3 GHz base, 8 GB of 2133 MHz DDR4 RAM, an NVIDIA GTX 960M with 2 GB of GDDR5 VRAM, and the larger 84 watt-hour battery. Oh, and I almost forgot, the 256 GB Samsung NVMe SSD. On another note, the UHD Touch version of the screen has 100% Adobe RGB color gamut capability, according to Dell. So this should be great for color work like correction in picture and video editing, as well as content consumption like games, movies, and even websites. Mine has 2 dead pixels, which is annoying, but at least they're not very noticeable. The display also has great viewing angles, except one weird error: a red shift on black backgrounds at off angles, particularly when looking at the screen from above and to the right, causes the shift pretty badly. If you look online, this is a pretty well documented problem. No issues when looking at it straight though, so whatever, I guess. So the specs aren't a weak point for this computer, and they certainly shouldn't be, because it comes at a price. But when I got this computer, I did because I had to be running Windows for the program I'm taking in college, and I figured that if I'm going to buy a new computer, I need to buy one I can do everything I'd like to do with. With that said, aside from using the computer for schoolwork, which includes writing, taking notes, reading, and programming, often using the Visual Studio IDE, I also do some gaming, content creation, obviously, photo editing, video editing, which is lumped in with content creation, game development in Unity, and app development using Android Studio. I'm happy to say that the computer does live up to all of these tasks. There have been once or twice where I wished I had 16 instead of 8 GB of RAM, but it's user upgradable, and I chose the configuration. And I've also often wished for a larger SSD, but like the RAM, this is user upgradable and going to depend entirely on what you plan to do with the computer. Video and picture editing using the Adobe Suite are generally quite responsive. Unity and Visual Studio are great, and honestly, the only time I've ever really seen this computer struggle, other than when I filled the RAM, is when running Android Studio. That's a beefy IDE. Gaming is of course good too, thanks to the computer's great specs and particularly the dedicated GPU. I haven't done any in-depth benchmarking, but the computer doesn't seem to throttle when gaming, although it does get pretty warm and the fans get pretty loud. While we're talking about the fans, sometimes they get loud when you're doing stuff that doesn't really seem very strenuous, and I've seen them engage when the processor was at or below 30 degrees Celsius. Now let's move on to probably my biggest complaint with the laptop: the battery. It's tough to get too upset by this, given that the version I'm running has a UHD screen and a dedicated GPU, so it takes a lot of power to run, but it isn't great. Dell obviously aren't magicians, so with specs like this, you're only going to see so much battery life, even though I have the larger battery version. I can usually hit around 4 hours doing light work, browsing, and editing documents, occasionally a little more. So like I said, not amazing. Oh, and one more complaint: the AC adapter is good, but the LED on it is kind of useless beyond making the cord easier to locate in the dark. It only has one color and it's always on, so it doesn't give you any indication of charge level or anything else. Another thing, if you look online, there are some people who feel Dell's quality control and customer support are pretty bad. There are horror stories for everything, so remember that if you go looking for them, you're gonna find them. And in my experience, everything has been okay. Just other people's experience are something to keep in mind. So, after all that, would I recommend this computer? Yes. Its form factor, specs, and build quality are all really, really great. The trackpad is fantastic, the UHD screen with high color accuracy is excellent for me, and if you're looking for a computer with similar specs, this could be a really great choice for you. But that's it, guys. Let me know with a like if you liked this video. Drop a comment below with what you thought. Do you have an XPS 15? Are you thinking about getting one? What do you think? If you love this video and want to see more, subscribe and ring that bell to get a notification whenever I post a new video. And check out another one of my videos here. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch at the links in the description. And if you're interested in buying this computer or other stuff, check out the Amazon links in the description with my affiliate code. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.